So the review of the Maimer. So we have to understand what's the significance of Vayir Shushan Solav Samecha. And as a result of that, it says, B'chol Medina Medina, there was Sasan v'Simcha, or Simcha v'Sasan. And then Layehudim Hoyso Oiroh v'Simcha v'Sasan v'Kor. So the implication is that first and foremost is in Shushan Abira, and there to the Medinas, and the culmination is Layehudim Hoyso Oiroh v'Simcha v'Sasan v'Kor. So what's the inyan? So he begins to explain that the Medrash says, pointing out that when Yidden went into Golos, the Eibishter went with them. Golul Bavel, the Shekhinah was with them, and then Golul Elam, and Elam is a reference to Shushan. The Shekhinah goes with them, and therefore, here's the Nakuda, Shushan becomes the Ir Habira. Shushan becomes the capital because the Yidden are there, primarily. It's the capital of the country, and the Shekhinah is there. So therefore, after the Bittul of the Gzeira, since the Shekhinah is primarily there, therefore, that's where the Simcha begins. That's where it starts. So, Kipshutam, Simcha v'Sasan in Shushan Yerabira, and from there, it goes to B'chol Medina, Medina, B'chol Ir v'Ir. It explains that these are places where Yidden don't have to be there, but they're only there, and Lord's Mevarin Etzutzik Dusha. That's the Gedim that the Gemara speaks about that attracted to Yidden, and that's the reason the Gemara says why Yidden went into Golos, which means to elevate the sparks, B'chlal. Okay, let's start again now, therefore, base. Shushan is a rose. A rose naturally is red, but it's whitened through fire. A white rose. And that's the transformation of cheshech to light. Red indicates the scent. Why are your garments red? Meaning soiled. What Esav said, give me these red lentils. So this is the union of klippah. And when it's transformed, it whitens. If your sins will be red, through tshuva, they'll be whitened. Hashem will whiten them. The Gzeira was because they benefited from the Suda of this Rosh. The diak is not that they ate the treif. That's serious, but that's not, doesn't elicit such a Gzeira. It's the head hana. Reb explains, that the head hana means, they felt safe and secure, because here they are invited to the king's palace. So we are the derech hateva. We've made it. One of ours is the queen. Everybody had such nachas that Esther was the queen. Meanwhile, she's anguishing and suffering every moment. But for the majority of people, this was a great breakthrough, integration, and they had hana. So the Rebbe explains that the head hana meant that they felt naturally safe. The emes is that the survival of Yidden in Golos is a constant miracle. It's a sheep surrounded by 70 wolves. You felt safe, you don't need the miracle. So naturally the wolves attacked. So the Gzeira explains the Gzeira was like a natural response to the Yidden just turning their back on the Eibishter, the natural state of a Yidden Golos, destruction. So the dik is the nana, the security that I know, they felt honored and flattered. This is all from the Gemara. They bow down to the tzelem to say minyan. That's Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah means thanks God, but no thanks. We're okay without you. And then there was the tshuva for a whole year. Actually, also, it didn't occur to anybody chas v'sholem, to renounce the Yiddishkeit. So this is the opposite of nenu. He said, and therefore they transformed the Gzeira. And that's the meaning of the rose, that the virtuous white rose that comes as a result of the transformation from its red state to its white state, through tshuva. Now, more detailed about this, he said, in the Shoshana Yeshba, base Perushim, a rose has two Perushim. On the pasuk, my beloved is to me, who pastures amongst the roses, in the field of roses. So then the Mamorim explains, we learned this. Pirush Aleph, the Koyel Avid is Atfila. It goes on davening. What's the connection to the rose? Kishishana Yeshla Tleisa Alin. The rose has 13 petals. Keneged, you give him with the Sarachamim, corresponding to you give him with the Sarachamim, Mishachim Adi Atfila, which I draw down through Tfila. That's one Pirush. Pirush Abez, the Kelim Torah. The rose refers to the avoid of Limud Torah, the Sheshanim, Beisius, Sheshonim. Sheshanim is the same letter as Sheshanim, they learn. Hainu Sheshonim Ba'alachas, I'm just going to quote that. Sheshonim Ba'alachas, they learn the halachas, it's Lashon HaZoyah. V'gam Gimel Ha'alim, the Sheshana, and moreover the 13 petals, in Keneged, you give me the Shatei and Dreshus Behet. Corresponds to the 13 midas, the Torah is expounded. Now, putting the two together, the pasuk says in the Chokosai, "V'salachti b'seichechem," I will walk amongst you. So, the diak l'chera pidiktok, it should have simply said, "V'oilech," I will go. V'hisalachti, it's kind of reflexive, a double kind of going. In fact, it does convey two kinds of movement. Hiluch melamata l'mayla, that's below from above. Sheshehuyin atfila shemelamata l'mayla, that's davening. Ukidush atfila sulam motzav artzav reish migyah shemayma. Atfila is the ladder that stretches from artza to shemayma. And then is hiluch melamayla l'mata, the movement from above to below. Sheyin ha'Torah sheyam shochem melamayla l'mata. Torah comes from heaven and is given to us. From heaven, Moshe Rabbeinu reminds the Yidden, he made his voice heard to you. So these are the two inyanim, Shoshana, which is also the symbol I mentioned yesterday of Persia. Its national symbol is the rose. Hence, the capital city is called Shusha. So, based on the Meilah Ha'etzel B'nei Yisrael is man Purim. We would assume it's the red rose for them, and through Avodah it becomes the white rose. So, these two inyanim of Torah and Tefillah by Yidden in Zman HaPurim, Kedisa b'Midrash Chazal, it says in Medrash, Shemotchi Osaf Tinei Kashabis Rabbah. Moishe Rabbeinu gathered the children, as we're going to say by the poet, the poet, the author, in the Slichas of Tanis Esther, we're about to say, the small holy seed. In addition to gathering the adults, so of course he worked with the adults, tshuva, he was pale, the holy Sederis, but in addition to that, dafka the children, and he davened with them. And elsewhere it says not only did he daven, but he learned. So he sees both in Yonim. He learned with them Torah and dafke the halachas v'akrovas. That was the time then. It was right after Pesach. Akrovas ha'omer. Explaining before Hashem dafke this, to be ma'ira the emunah in the binyan Beis Hamikdash, and we're going to have it again. And b'schos learning it as if we brought it and so on. So we see Akoponim, we see at any rate that he did the two inyanim. We see these two sources of Torah and Tefillah and Torah. A Jew has to move in both directions. Milamata l'mayla l'mata. Tefillah and Torah. Canal is mentioned. Moreover, What did they learn? Dafke akrovas ha'omer. In addition to that was the time of the year, and for the reason I just mentioned, but now the pnimius inyanim. Given shegam bakrovas ha'omer, dafke in this mitzvah, yesh beize fana hilachana. There's the two inyanim. How so? Ki ha'omer bo min ha'sa'irim. The omer comes from barley shehi meichel behema. That's animal fodder. So we have to bring the animal, the barley from below to above. That's the avoid of korbanos. The secret, the mystery of korbanos ascends to this mystery of the Ein Sof, says the Zayah. Yesterday's chit, that's the first time. It's the first time it's mentioned in the Chumash was yesterday. This he brings it from Vayikra. Why not from Al? Wasn't it yesterday's Chumash? It was. And there he brings it actually, Nachas Ruach Lefanai. So why does he have to go to Vayikra? In the order. It's the Ikar place is Vayikra. Deals with Karbonis. At any rate, so the Karbonis ascend and cause a pleasing aroma, as it were. As Rashi explains, Nachas Ruach Lefanai, it's a Nachas before me. He says, Hashem, Shamarti v'naseh ritzoini. I said my will was done. So that's the avoid of what? The Melamata Lamaila. Shom nimshachach kach Melamata Lamata. Then the korban pales. Hamshocha thereafter from above to below. The Eibusha says it's Nachas Ruach Lefanai, Nachas Gamloshen, Chuz Darga. Nachas also means to shrink or to descend. So Nachas implies the Hamshocha descending response. I think I told you it's also Chosen. Chosen is also the same Oisius as Nachas, and therefore the same meaning as Chos. So Chosen is a descent from Elam HaTorah, where he was before, to be married, etc. But it's a Yerida L'Tzerech, the ultimate Aliyah. And so the Nachas Ruach is the Lefanai before me. In other words, the word Lefanai didn't really have to be stated. Obviously, Nachas Ruach, Shamarti v'naseh ritzoini. Who's the Nachas Ruach for the Eibishter? What's the diuk Lefanai? Lefanai is Tainuk shel beire shel amayli shel be'erech matainuk shel nivre. My Nachas, which is incomparable, my Tainuk than the Tainuk of the Nivre v'hemshech v'kocha, as the Marash explains at length in that v'hemshech v'kocha. So it's a gewaldig Tainuk l'mayla, and that's drawn down here. I'm shoch befen shel menucha. And it comes down in such a way, in a tranquil way, in a peaceful way, not in a way that shatters the world. Shezer and Yonish Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash is a place of tranquility. What is the house that you shall build? The Pasuk says there, we say this in the Haftarah of that the heavens and the heavens cannot contain me. Which house will you build to me? It's a rhetorical question. Where will be my place of rest? Rhetorically, is Dafke and Lamata in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's a place of menucha. So the tainug of the beire comes down Lamata in a way of menucha. In other words, in a pnimius, bringing serenity and peace, tranquility. So if this is understood when I get Avodah of every year, namely, that's the base of but the same is true, therefore, for every individual. Why? Because I'll dwell amongst you, from Razal, Shalom, someone bring, not I'll dwell in it, but in you every year. Because every year is a Mishkan and a Mikdash to the Eibishter. Wherever it is, it's Pchinas Eretz. B'pnimis is Eretz Yisrael. What's Eretz? Commandment Azal Lom Nikrashma Eretz Sharatzisa. Last it's called Eretz because She desired to do the will of her master. And say, Eretz means to do the will of Hashem, baritza, with alacrity and marutza and satisfaction, with cheshech and desire. And when? Continuously. And the Pasuk describes Hashem's eye upon the land forever. Therefore, Yid, wherever he is, he makes it Eretz Yisrael. A recorded often, which he mentioned in the previous Maamar, from the Mitul Rebbe. He makes the whole world a place where the eyes of Hashem are upon it, meaning revealed from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Yeah, Gimel. So also further to understand the union of Shushan, we explained it now as what? As Tefillah and Torah. But moreover, we marked in the Chayr, Tzarech Lav and Lama, Big Shasta, Tzachashveri, Sheinosin, Gamoch, Layehudim, Asher B'Shushan, Lasis Kados, Hayim, Umocha. So, Esther asked the king for an additional day that the Yidden should avenge themselves against their enemies. Preemptive strike. Why was this necessary? Monavshach. Im kvar gombram milchama, if the war is complete, in tzedek lasis kedas hayim b'Shushan. You don't have another day in Shushan. Vim lav, and if the war is not over, helem lasis kein gam b'shar medinas hamelech. Then why doesn't the war continue everywhere else? So the answer of Pashta says there are more enemies there. The answer is going to be Baruchni, is more, not in quantity, but in quality. The Milchama, when the rest of the realm, Baruchni is in Yon, the Milchama Begasa Sarah. This is in Milchama in the coarse, obvious, naked evil. The Milchama Zon is time of Beyemrishan, it took one day. Yud Gimel. And Yudalid was already Yom Enoch. Omna Meshushan Abira, but Shushan in the capital, Tzahayra Voida, Hoyso Tzarech Lis Milchama Gam B'Dakar Sarah. Here, the Milchama, there's demand that is in Milchama, even in the subtle evil. It's not so easy, not so readily identifiable, and that's the Pashto Senyonim. They had to, ferret out these anti-Semites who showed a very nice face and pretended to be friends with the Jews. Some of my best friends, the Jews, right? And you'll find these people dafka in the halls of power, dafka in Shushan, dafka in government. That's what they are. So therefore, since this Dakos is very much deeper, this kind of evil, he's talking about the self, right? The self. So therefore, the battle is more difficult. So therefore, they needed another day, meaning it's a different order of Avodah to identify this subtle enemy within. Rabbi explains, famous addition, Shatam lakach shekorban oshim toloi. So oshim toloi means a guilt offering that's dependent on whether the person actually transgressed. The classic case is he brings the person a piece of fat and doesn't know whether it's kosher or not. Chaylev or shuman. So the price, says the Gemara, the minimum price, the cost. He bought this from the temple treasury. And even if he didn't, he bought his own ram. So the value has to be sort of shavish, 2 sloyim. And that's beyoser, much more expensive. Korban chatos, shibas dinka. The dinka is in fact it's a Persian coin actually. It's a 24th. It's a 24th of the korban oshim talui. So korban chatos is, you sinned inadvertently, but you know. The case of oshim talui, he doesn't know. But the korban chatos he knows. So the question is, a sin that you did the korban costs much less then a sin you don't know. Why? Since the Osham comes on a doubt, so he justifies himself, well, maybe I didn't. So therefore, he doesn't regret it so much. Therefore, we make him pay more. So that we're compelling him to give himself more, to achieve atonement. In Likutei Sichos, and it's Chelik Gimel, they bring it here. In our orders, Chelik Gimel, the Rebbe gives a whole beer on Rabbeinu Yoina, and the Nikud of the beer is, like he's saying here, that a suffix is a reference to the Dakas Hara. And the Dakas Hara is much more difficult to expunge oneself of, because it's subtle and it's not so terrible, and externally he's a nice guy, a wonderful chassid. So at the Nekuda Rabbeinu Yoni, he's not mischaret so much, doesn't regret it so much. It's not only because, maybe I didn't do it. It's maybe it's not a problem. It's not a problem. No, it's a little yeshes here and there, a little timeout, a little intolerance. No, basically, he's a good guy. So what's the problem? So that requires, and not only that, actually, I'm remembering the sichel, it's even more. B'chlal and aveda dan b'shoigig. In a way, it's worse than aveda done deliberately. Because an aveda done deliberately, that could be a lapse, a momentary lapse, and they got caught up and he transgressed. Shoigig shows that it comes from your pnimis. It wasn't deliberate, it was spontaneous. It came from a natural place with it. It's a deeper chet. It's Dakas Hara. So he's a vinyan ba'avodah, and avodah she'oshim toli bo. So the classic case, it's not only this case, mind you. Could be in Hilchos Shabbos too. It's any avodah which, if you did b'shoigig, you did chayav korban chatos. If you're not sure, you bring an oshim toli. There's many avodahs like that. But the classic one is the one he brings. I think this is the example he brings in Rambam Hilchos Shkogas. That's the example that Rambam brings. Al sofik chaylev sofik shumen. So it's fat, and he doesn't know whether it's non-kosher fat or kosher fat. And if it comes out that it was kosher, before he brings the korban, bas dinka, he brings the korban chatas that cost a dinka, a small coin. Seller is 12 dinka, so it's 20. And the korban chata, korban noshim is 2 sloyim. So it's 24th. He explains the halachas of Asham Toloi. So what's the moshel? The moshel is the fat. That's the classic moshel. What's the inyan? Here he spells it out for us. The fat represents delight, pleasure, tainug. As opposed to regular food, which is to exist. This is not existence, but this is a gishmak, tainug, luxury. So where's his tainug? Where's his gishmak? Is it sunken literally in forbidden matters? Or it's not forbidden, but it's permissible things. This is we mean by this is an illustration of Dakas Hara. Not doing anything wrong. He could be perfect on the score sheet. But where's his gishmak? This is the suffix. And it's so subtle and it's so deep that it requires a deeper avodah. So that's the whole Melcham in Shushan Abirim. They're moving in Shushan, avodah Abirim Dakas Hara, so Shushan, the capital, which is another day, it's a whole new, the different order of avodah. It's the avodah of the Dakas Hara. No, in Yiddish, Chassidim will say, "Was liegt er?" Where really does he lie? Now you can't see externally because most of the days he's doing good things. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean where his pnimis is. This is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said. One of the Pirushim before he passed away doesn't know where he's going. Everything is beseder. But where's my etzem? Where's my emes? Gishmak and tainug? I don't know. He said.
Like in the first parak of Tanya.
The first parak of Tanya, no. Yeah. Yeah. It's only in Machshav Dibur Ma'aseh, but not B'pnimius. Yeah. 500 Dakis and Beinani, says the Alter Rebbe. Yeah, but that's the general Indian. I don't know if this is related or not, but I'm just remembering this discussion. I mean, this is a kid in Australia. The kid was already in yeshiva with Yanko Reitzes. I remember he posed this question to me. It's not really related, but since I'm thinking of it, I'll share it with you. So it is related. The Hainu, a poor person, as you know, is can't afford to go to the restaurant or steak a dinner, and somebody invites him or sends to the house to steak a dinner. He's about to sit down. It's succulent. His mouth is watering, and his mouth is watering. Let's say, make the example better. He was told about it yesterday or that morning or last week. So a whole week he's waiting for this. A whole week he's waiting, anticipation for the steak dinner. And he's sitting on the plate and he's literally salivating. And then someone comes along and takes it away. Gone. Then there's the gvir, the wealthy fella, who has steak every night, every other night. He's about to sit down at his table to eat his steak, and then someone takes it away. Who's going to be more upset? So conventionally, the immediate response is the poor fella, waiting for so long, and he said, the answer is no. Here, there's no shaykhs to the whole thing, really. He was promised this, and it's taken away. Well, I really didn't expect it anyway. But the gvir, I mean, but his response might be like the premiums we're talking about. But the gvir was used to this indulgent, you touch it and take it away. Well, there's hell to pay. His tivus will not be compromised because that's him. And for the poor person, it's a fantasy. Okay, didn't happen. Too good to be true or too bad to be true. Similar Indian. It's not always so readily apparent. Okay, a little bit further. Yes, so through the aforementioned Aveda Boim, the Bechinas, Shoishan Emek Ayumba. These are the opening words. The opening words of the Chazans after saying the opening bracha, the piyut, the beginning of the Musaf of Yom Kippur. Authored by Rabbi Eliezer HaKalar, the famous Paitonim, who lived in the time of the Gemara, maybe even earlier, maybe the Mishnah even. Goes back very, very early. So what's the Inyan? So the simple pshat is the rose, referring to the Jewish people. Emek is like a valley, the valley of awe. And the valley of awe, Yom Kippur is a day of awe. So that's the basic imagery here. The Klal Yisrael, the valley of awe. Maybe some of the translation can look it up. Something like that. The Alter Rebbe says, so this is Alter Rebbe's a Maimer written by the Mittel Rebbe. It's written by the Mittel Rebbe, and it's not so common. Shayuma Loshen Toikef. I don't know. Shayuma means awe, but it means intense. I don't know if he means intense per se, but intense awe. Not stam yira, but intense. But he goes beyond the yira. V'hainu ha'toikif, that's Muslim Mesuyis Baruch. Who's the ultimate strength and power? Atzmos. So we'll continue that Be'ez Hashem tomorrow. Tomorrow's Purim. We won't, because we're going to be mitzvahim at this hour.